Looking at the GUI TicTacToe, things that we have so far, we have a basic frame, we have a grid layout where we're putting the buttons in, we have a layout where there's a label in the north, and there's a north container as well. We have our basic action performed, where when we click on a button, right now it's just going to set the text to be X. So if I run this, it pops up a basic window. Right now it's got these labels on them. It's got X wins and O wins. There's a little bit more I need to do with the layout. One of the requirements is that besides just the name, and which has the label in it, I need to be able to change the name as well. Let me go ahead and add that in. So the first thing I'm going to need is a J button for X change name. I think I'm going to capitalize those, C and N. It's going to be a new J button. And then the text inside is going to be change X's name. A semicolon after that. Similar thing for O. O change name, change O's name. And then I need something called a text field, which actually reads in text. So a text field is a single line of text that you read in, as opposed to a text area, which is actually multiple lines that you can read and type in. So a JText field is where I'm going to enter in the name that I want to change. Let's do X change field is a new JText field. And at the moment there's going to be no text in it. I need to import that, as that's a swing container, or a swing component. JText field, O change field, a new JText field. Now these things are going to go into a grid. So besides, instead of having just a 1 row and 2 columns, now I need 3 rows and 2 columns. I now need to take these 4 things and actually add them into this container down here. So north is going to add this X change name. North is going to add O change name. North will add X change field. North will add O change field. So if I look at this, notice that now these containers are up here. Eventually I'm going to need to add action listeners to these 2 buttons, just like I did before. So I added this action listener for the buttons in my TicTacToe grid. I'm also going to need to add them for these 2. Let's go ahead and do that now before I forget. So X change name dot add action listener, and then this class is what's listening for it. Same with O. Add action listener this. So now when I click on these 2 buttons, it actually fires the event correctly. One thing I'm going to have to watch out for now is that this action event, it might be one of the buttons in my grid, but it also just might not be. So I'm going to have to double check that. So in here, why don't I create a Boolean where I check to see if it was a grid button. Inside of here, if I actually find one of the buttons, I'm going to set grid button to true. And when I'm all done, if grid button is still false, which means I didn't actually find any of the buttons in the grid as the thing that was clicked, then I need to check to see if it was X change name or O change name. If event.getSource dot equals X change name, then I'm going to do something here. Otherwise, if its source is O change name, I'm going to do something here. Just to double check that this works, one thing I'm going to do real quick is let me set the text field that corresponds to it to have some text. I'm not actually going to do this in my final coding, but this will let me see if the buttons are working or not. So you can set text and get text out of text fields. You can actually do the same thing with buttons and labels. So set text and get text are the two ways you get strings in and out of the various JSwing components. So let's set the text to exchange. I'm going to do the same thing with O. O change field, set text to O change. So let's see if that works. So I click this, notice the text shows up down here. Eventually, I'm actually going to take this text and move it in here, up at the top. All right, moving into the actual game itself. So I have a series of buttons. If I want to use the coding that I had from my previous tic-tac-toe game, though, I'm going to need a grid, which actually keeps internally what's going on. And I would like to just use the check win and the check ties from the previous game. I think that would be easier. So I'm actually going to create an int array. Let's see, what did I call that? I called it board, which is going to be a new int array of 3 by 3, 2 dimensions. I'm going to keep the same constants as well so that they're consistent between the two. So I'm going to create a final int blank, which is going to be a 0. Final int x move, O move, and then I think I'm going to do x turn, turn as well. Let me just copy these from this other project. So blank is 0, x move is 1, O move is 2, x turn is 0, x turn is 1, and I have a variable that keeps track of those. All right, so when I actually play a move, instead of just setting the text to x, I actually need to check to see whose turn it is. If turn is x turns, then I need to set the text to x. I need to actually change it in the board to x move. And also I need to make sure the turn changes. If not, that better mean it's O's turn. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set the text to O in the button so I can actually see what's happened. That spot is going to be now an O move, so it's no longer a blank. Turn equals O turn, or I'm sorry, X turn. So when I run this, X is turn, O, X, O. Now we still have the same problem where I can click on the same spot, so I need to make sure that doesn't happen. So I can check the board. Make sure it's a blank before you do that. And then I'm going to take all of this stuff and hit tab to move it over one, because now that I have this open brace, it matches. All right. Once I've actually performed a move, one of these two things, I have to do the stuff for checking for wins. Now, since I don't have a while loop around the whole thing, I'm kind of just waiting for people to click. After I make a move is now where I need to check to see if somebody's won or not. So basically here, I'm going to check for wins and ties. So in the tic-tac-toe project, the original one, what I was checking for was down here. This is an incomplete check win. Hopefully you have the complete one. But I'm going to check to see if somebody has won at this point. I'm actually going to pull the same method into this. So I have check win in here. It's the same board command, so that should be fine. I'm passing in the player. So now I can say if check win x move is true, x wins. And I'm going to do something there where I'm actually going to update the score. Otherwise, if O wins, O wins, and I'll update O's score. And finally, if neither of those, I'll check for a tie. So then it'll do a tie. For now, I'm just going to put in a dummy check tie just so that it compiles correctly. Just always going to return false for now. Eventually, it'll be a lot like your other tic-tac-toe where you basically check through every single one of the grid squares and see if any of them are a blank. So here, let me see if sys out. Let me see if it actually prints out that x won.